last shoe out of the way. Perfect.
Ready?
Yes, we're started. Oh, yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. We have a very lively panel. You are going to be entertained for sure. And I have the pleasure of welcoming all of you today. My name is Langley. I'm the Commissioner of the Nova Scotia Public Service Commissioner, and I'm really pleased to be the moderator today. I think we're going to be breaking some ground here. And I'm hoping not to fall off the precipice as we break the ground, but I'm sure we'll be fine. And thank you for joining us for what I believe will be a thought-provoking panel discussion focusing on recruitment and retention in the modern workforce. That's what we're here for today. I'm delighted to welcome our panelists who are joining us today for what I'm guaranteeing is going to be a lively discussion. You have a role in this, though, so I'm counting on you to participate. We have voices and perspectives reaching across this great country of ours from east to west, and I'm going to, in a moment, introduce these folks to some greater degree, but just for the moment, I wanted to welcome James Runge, Christine Donoghue, Mike Kennedy, and Colleen McCormick, and again, I'll offer some more details in just a few moments. Now, this is going to be an open and relaxed environment. We are really going to press the fun factor, and I'm told the best way to get everybody in the mood for that is to have you just stand up and take a few deep breaths. Let's do it. All right. Now, I am not a yogi, and I'm not, but I do do yoga. So let's just try to see if we can. And all of you who are joining us on Fair is a Big Bad Universe, please stand up wherever you are and take a couple of deep breaths. Let's do it. In and out. In and out. One more time. In and out. Shake it off. You're in Nova Scotia. Now, I'm hoping that got you relaxed and in the mood, and it really does something, if nothing else, is that really disarms us, and it brings us all, we all stood up and breathed and shook it off in a room together. As our jumping off point today, some of what you're going to hear will reference Deloitte's University's Global Human Capital Report, the trends for 2015. And there are a few items in that I think are of interest, leading the new world of work, and it identifies a number of trends within areas such as culture and engagement, leadership, learning and development, reinventing HR and how we do HR. And we had a brief passing comment before we came in today about HR typically being felt or known as that rules-based, stifling, choking type of practice. It really isn't that, or we're trying to make it different. Performance management, analytics, and several other things, but these are just a few highlights. Bold and innovative thinking along with creative approaches are needed for the new world. So percolate over your deepest questions as we prepare to begin. And also before we begin, I want to remind the room that we are broadcasting our session today, and we're going to be taking questions from across the country and hopefully around the world from our various platforms, including Twitter at hashtag IPACRNR. Hashtag IPACRNR. Did I get that right? Good. Very good. So now I'm going to introduce our panel to those of you who are joining us here in Halifax. We have a packed room for anybody who can't see the room, and for those of you across the country or around the world virtually. And we're going to start with James. James Runge recently began a new career in municipal government with the City of Calgary. As a neighborhood partnership coordinator, he works with community organizations to support organizational development and recreation program development as well. James is actively involved in IPAC at the national and regional levels and is wrapping up a 2-year term as the National New Professional Chair. As the new Public Servant Chair in Edmonton, James and a team celebrated the 10th anniversary of New Public Servants Recognition Dinner and the 5th anniversary of the New Public Servants Award of Excellence in 2013. Outside of work, James is an avid sports fan, publishes a regular sports blog called Twine Time?
Correct.
Twine Time. So I'm sure you can, you're going to get some new followers, for sure. Christine Donoghue is the acting president of the Public Service Commission of Canada with close to 25 years of public service experience. She is recognized for her strong leadership, broad experience at the executive level, and strategic skills related to the development and integration of policy frameworks and strategic planning, something we can all use for sure. Christine brings innovation, collaboration, and direction to the Public Service Commission and plays a key role as a member of the executive management team there. Mike Kennedy is a Halifax-based chartered accountant, entrepreneur, and volunteer. He has previously worked with the province of Nova Scotia in the Office of Planning and Priorities, with the Executive Council Office, and the Department of Health and Wellness. Mike has worked in a variety of roles with Cancer Care Nova Scotia and Deloitte. His interests are many and diverse. He is a co-founder of the Halifax Awesome Foundation, H2O Golf, and the Canadian Bacon Cookhouse, which serves up the yummiest treats you can ever imagine. Currently, he serves as the director with Sculpture Nova Scotia and Hope Blooms. In 2014, Mike was named the Halifax Chamber of Commerce Person of the Year. So we're happy to welcome Mike to our panel today. And Colleen McCormick is the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the British Columbia Government's Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training. Previously, she was the Director of Innovative Partnerships in the Ministry of Social Development, where she managed social innovation. Among other things, Colleen is the founder of the Social Innovators Network Foundation. She helps to organize TEDx Mile Zero. She's a monthly blogger for the Canadian Government Executive Magazine, which now will have more followers, right? For you too.
Maybe.
And a Government Game Changers podcaster, which I think would be really exciting to tune into. So a warm welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining us today. So as you can see from the introductions, our panelists are well positioned to speak on this topic today and provide perspectives about recruitment and retention and a changing workforce and changing trends in how we treat our workforce in the public service. And so to begin today, I'm going to invite each of our panelists to speak for about 5 minutes on the topic. And then what we're going to do is we're going to jump into an open discussion, including question and answers from you in the room, from those in our virtual audience who can get their questions and comments to us. And I think we're in for a very exciting afternoon. So I'm going to begin by inviting James to start.
Excellent. You guys hear okay?
There you go. Okay, so welcome every one of you. Thanks for coming to the annual conference. Welcome to my fellow panelists. Thanks for participating in this. One thing, if you'll notice right away, we had this little breathing relaxation session, and I just wanted to point out a really cool fun fact. As soon as we were offered to stand up, the first thing I did was I took off my shoes. So those in the back, you won't be able to see it, but my shoes are off. I'm wearing my lucky University of Oregon socks, so I went to school there. And that's just to set up the tone that I think we want this to be as relaxing as a session as possible. Everyone relax, have fun, enjoy, and we want to hear from you guys as much as we want to share information with you. So we just wanted to get that point across. I have a quick question for you, and again, this is going to get some movement out of all of you. So my first question for you is I would like you to stand up if you feel career professional development is important to you. I want you to stand up if you agree with that. Is that important? I see everybody in this room standing up. Is that correct? So those viewing us, everyone in this room is standing up. Excellent. That's what we were hoping to see. Now I have another question for you. Now, not yet. Not yet. It is a sit-down question though, so way to foresee the future. I want you to sit down if you feel you could have better career development in your current workplace.
I don't want to.
Well, isn't that interesting? So take a look around. How many of you are still standing? Mr. David Brock is standing at the back. Of course you are, David. Way to ruin our game. So 4 of you are standing. So there you go, everyone viewing. 4 people in this room are standing out of a collective. How many do you say would be in this room right now?
5,000.
5,000 people. So 5,000 people are in this massive room that we're in, and 4 of you only stay standing. So what an interesting telling sign that is. So we all feel career development is important to us, but we also feel like we're not getting enough of it, whether it's in different forms of support from management. We haven't found that yet. We're looking for different avenues, and I think that's what we're going to get out of the 3 of them when I turn the mic over to them. So an interesting point on this, and from my perspective, as was shared, I work with IPAC as the National New Professional Chair outgoing as of yesterday. And what we have right now is we have the IPAC New Professional Survey going out to new professionals across the country. This is led through IPAC at the direction of federal clerks, where this idea originally came from. And we've been getting information back. So at this point, the survey is still open, which I just want to say, if you have not completed it yet, and you are a new professional, and we'll define that in a second here, we encourage you to please sign in and take this survey. It'll be open until the conclusion of the conference. You can go find it on the IPAC website, ipac.ca, of course. And we'll be tweeting it out from the IPAC Twitter accounts as well. So I highly recommend, if you haven't done so, please do. If you have already done so, please forward that on to new professionals that you know. We'd love to get your feedback. So as of August, we have 2,500 responses to this survey. And I just wanted to share with you guys a few points to consider when we turn this over to all of you and get your feedback on it. I'd love to know. Please feel free to disagree with any of the stats I'm going to share with you on the survey at this point. Please feel free to agree with them, and please feel free to challenge and raise questions to it as well, because that's what we're here for. So one of the things that we noticed is out of the 2,500 responses, length of stay seems to be a big issue. I'm sorry, I wish I had a little table here that I would have, but I don't have a little table here. I'm trying to find the right page, and how embarrassing, hey? It's okay, just let it fall. There we go, I got it. No, come sit, I'm letting you sit beside me. I feel more comfortable when you sit beside me. All right, so length of stay. What we found was, forgive that little time quote there, new professionals right now, when they joined, how long they expected to stay working for the public service. Of course, as we know, that incorporates all orders of government. And people said that when they joined the public service, 48% of them expected to stay for more than 10 years. So they really joined the public service seeing that this would be a career for them, a lifetime career potentially. So what we've seen now is when they take a look back on it today, only 42% feel that they'll stay for more than 10 years. So a drop of 5% from that. And another big drop that we've seen is more people believe that they're only going to stay for 1 to 4 years. So people are now joining the public service and they don't even foresee themselves staying in it for longer than a 4-year time span, which is quite scary when you think about the future of the public service in Canada. Very telling stat there. So I'd love, when we turn it over to all of you, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, and whether you agree or disagree on that. From a personal side point, I can share, I started with the federal public service 5 years ago, as of April this past year. And when I joined, I actually fit right into this stat. I expected to probably stay there for a minimum around 5 to 10 years was what I thought, but I hoped it would turn into a career. As I approached my 5-year mark this past year, I wanted to change. I was done. I didn't foresee a long-lasting career path for me in the federal public service, and I was ready to try something different. And there was a bunch of contributing factors to that. Career development was one of them, and leadership as well. So what happened was I started applying and looking outside not only the federal public service, but the public service as a whole. Oddly enough, when I was doing my job search, I stumbled across this position I'm in now with the city of Calgary. Things went where they were, and now I work there and I'm still in the public service, and I love my new job. And the city of Calgary has been great to me. They've offered me great career opportunities and leadership potential, and I'm getting great leadership from just being here, and they're allowing me to be here today. So that's one of the things, though. I'm pretty much the telling stat of this survey. So it was interesting when I got the survey results from IPAC National and saw the numbers. It was disheartening, but it was a double-edged sword for me. I felt sad about it because it was showing something that I thought, but I felt happy in a way because I wasn't alone. I really felt like I was surrounding myself with people that were happy to be with the public service, and I wasn't happy. And at the time I thought, why does everyone else seem to be loving the job that they're in? And why am I not? And what's wrong with me? Do I not have the passion that they have? What's going on? And then to see the stats, okay, so there is a bigger issue here. A lot of people are feeling the same way as I am, and how can we change that? So these are things that hopefully we can start answering those questions today. As we said, this is a beginning conversation. This is not a topic we'll ever get to a resolution with within the next hour, but it's something that we want to have that conversation start with and maybe potentially see where we can go from here. So I don't want to take it more than 5 minutes. I think I've done enough of that. So I will turn it over.
Thanks, James. I'm Christine Donoghue from the Public Service of Canada. You know that the public service of Canada is probably one of the biggest employers in the country, with over almost 300,000 people, with diverse careers that go from administrative, scientific, engineering, medical, enforcement professionals, etc. But we do recognize that there's an issue that is similar to what James just outlined, is that our below 35 population is not growing. So recognizing that public servants may not want to stay for 25-year careers or more, there may be an opportunity for us to recognize that and change the way that we conduct our recruitment. Is it okay to have a revolving door? Why not? Why can't we have public servants that come in for a number of years, leave the public service, gather more experience, and then come back so that all Canadians can benefit from that experience? So those are things that we're exploring as well. So that's why for us, talking about recruitment and retention is important, because the notion of retention may not be the same notion that we've had in the past. Maybe it's time for us to rethink retention and basically make sure that we still continue to contribute to Canadians' careers that people may be willing to take on an in and out basis. The most important part, though, is for us to remember that there are principles that are important to us at the public service, which is fundamentally that it's a system that is meant to be based on merit and that is non-partisan. So that is important because the credibility of the public service has to be maintained in that perspective. So we continue to do that, but we have to evolve it with the rights and the obligations for public servants. So those are very important. But what we have to do is also start considering what it means to do career development within the public service. You know, we may have, since our statistics do demonstrate that we have both, like that our below 35 population is not rising, that maybe older public servants have to be more open to reverse mentoring. Maybe we need to do our business differently. Maybe we need to consider more ways of conducting our business. And all statistics show that we have to rethink the way that we do conduct our work because the world is fundamentally changing. We have room for innovation, we should be rethinking, and we should be excited about reinventing and reinitializing different ways of conducting our business. We have to rethink the way we conduct leadership because actually leadership is important at all levels. And to be able to give that room and to conduct flatter organizations where innovation and ideas can come to the forefront in a much easier manner than through layered hierarchy. So that's important as we think and as we move forward. And the Public Service Commission right now is rethinking the way it's conducting its business. So when we go into hiring and when we have, and we all recognize that we have a highly rules-based system. Usually when you're entrenched for a long time in the rules-based system, you become process-oriented. Maybe that's not the best way of doing our business. Maybe what we need to do is not focus on the process of hiring, but on the quality of hires. So we've been rethinking our whole policy suite, the way we conduct our oversight to the rest of the public service. And what we're seeing is that we need to actually sometimes vacate the space, leave room for hiring managers to use their judgment. But with judgment come accountability. And we have to actually ensure that departments who understand their business, understand their operational needs, can actually promote and go get the people that they need with the right skill sets. Well, what's the time for the right skill set? Is the time now or is it the time the future? I think it's important that everybody who understands what they're looking for can make that assessment themselves and not just have the commission do it on their behalf. So vacating some of the space, but offering the expertise and assisting them is what the commission is looking to do. So what we're trying to do essentially is building tomorrow's public service today. So really what we're looking at, and that's basically a model that we're developing within our own organization. You know what it means? Huge culture shift. In order to better engage the talent that is out there and that we so desperately need in public service, we have to modify our culture. So you'll hear me probably in the course of the discussion talk about culture shift, the importance of engagement. And you know, when Laura Lee mentioned at the beginning, changing the way we do HR. We have HR specialists who probably have so many ideas, but that they've been put in a process box. They need to be the advisors. they have the knowledge. They need to be the headhunters that we need to have to be able to bring the right talent for the right amount of time in the public service.
Back to follow there, that's great. From my perspective, I don't think it's, in terms of our retention and recruitment and retention piece, I don't think it's so much a recruitment piece. I mean, who wouldn't want a job where you have the opportunity to work?
With me.
Absolutely. With Christine, absolutely. But on complex problems, that where your mandate is kind of that triple bottom line, that if you're in the private sector or the NGO sector, that you don't necessarily have the opportunity to work on that. I think from a retention perspective, and I'll speak a little bit from the perspective as past chair of GovernX, which is an entity that focused primarily on allowing new ideas about how the public service works to service within Nova Scotia, and had probably a millennial focus. I think a big piece is around, and I'll speak probably primarily towards some of the challenges that as it relates to millennials. The simple job design isn't geared to make best use of millennial talent in many respects. Millennials are raised in an environment where collaboration, openness, and flexibility are kind of our raison d'etre across almost every aspect of life, whether it's how we engage in social media or how we tackle problems. And so shifting the traditional job design piece to allow for use of those talents and inclinations. A lot of lessons to be learned from the private sector in terms of job structure. I think that emerging trend that we're starting to see with the sharing economy, where a lot more jobs are either freelance or project-based, we can start to learn from that, and it opens up a ton of exciting opportunities in terms of how we use internal talent, particularly those millennials who feel very shackled within a given job structure, and also opening our doors to enable tri-sector athletes, I'd call them, to emerge. Having a pool of talent that is kind of semi-permeable, doesn't necessarily need to sit within the ranks of the public service. Complex problems don't care what department they sit in or what organization they sit in. It's all about bringing to bear the resources to address the complex problem in the right time with the right talent. Like to see the emergence of kind of those, there'd be any number of jobs that in a rigid hierarchical structure, the jobs that don't exist yet. The role of the bumblebee, who essentially, great job for a millennial, you'd be paid full-time to cross-pollinate ideas and information across departments. Too often, when I worked in central government, you'd run into the piece where kind of the policy document that was brilliantly crafted within one department makes it to the top, and sits on a desk next to a paper that has pretty much the exact same idea, and they never talk to each other. So roles that are all about internal communication, over the last number of years, I think communication has become so externally focused, and we've lost attention to coordinating ideas across internal government. So roles specific to sharing information, whether that's over coffee, through social media, blogging, or any number of other ways, but creating roles for to allow information to flow freely. The creation of entrepreneur roles, I think, as you were referencing, where the job description is perhaps as simple as solve this problem and come back to us when you've got it, and not being handcuffed by what department you're working with, who you're reporting to, whether it's something where you're allowed to engage actively with the public or not, taking some of the shackles off in terms of process on how you do the job. And I think in terms of professional development, we've built up a very robust formal PD programs, both within government and within academic institutions. And sometimes it's the simplest solution that works. An organization called Cognitive Edge that does a lot of work around complex problems has indicated that one of the most important pieces to have in place for solving complex problems is informal networks. So how do we encourage those to emerge and thrive within our public sector to allow us to tackle the problems that we're working on? One of the pieces that we did with GovernX was pretty simple. We carried out exit interviews with all retiring deputy ministers. So before they left, we brought together 12 to 15 young public servants, asked the deputies 3 questions. What was your proudest accomplishment, which gave them a chance to reflect a little bit? What was your biggest regret, the thing that you didn't get to accomplish, and what would you change if you could? A very informal way of creating some networking, but also of getting knowledge translation happening. which is often there's a vacuum kind of in the middle level of employees, and we need to be more active at opening up dialogue and sharing information across sectors. One idea I had was in terms of after there's often you'll see public servants retire only to come back on a contract for double the amount of money, which makes my chartered accountant sense cringe a little bit as a taxpayer. But what if we paired up a millennial that would kind of build into the RFP process for when we're contracting like a former civil servants, a build-in that they have to take kind of a millennial with them, so that there's some built-in knowledge translation and transfer of skills and knowledge both ways, and creating a pathway for workforce entry for younger employees. So just a couple ideas I have, and happy to chat more. Looking forward to hearing more from this amazing panel and you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to follow your piece here because I agree with pretty much everything you said. I just want to do a bit of a check-in. You can't see, can you? Yeah, that sucks. I hate podiums, but I'm going to do it for you. I guess I don't need, is this working? No, I'm going to keep this because that's really uncomfortable. So this whole conference has been around crisis and opportunity. And I think the crisis that we just saw play out in this room about those folks that don't feel like their career development might be as supported as they'd like. I think that's the biggest crisis we're facing. And I'm going to focus on talent within because I actually don't believe that we are doing any justice with tapping into the potential locked within the public service. And where I'm coming from today with what I'm going to pitch, and it's just an idea for pitching that can take many shapes and forms, is a result of my frustration, deep-seated frustration. I've been in public service for over 11 years, and I have met the most amazing people time and time and time again. And when I sit and talk with them, this isn't quite shameless promotion of the blogging, I'm just so fed up of not seeing them on a platform somewhere, not allowing their principles and their practices and those ideas that they have getting any kind of airtime. I want to showcase that. And that's what I'm trying to do on a regular basis with the blog space that I have with Canadian Government Executive Magazine. It's called Entrepreneurship in Action. It's really talking about practices and principles. So principles will drive your practices, and it's shining a light on talent that is everywhere that we may not be seeing or focusing in on. And the Government Game Changers podcast, that's the next version of this because it's very time consuming for me to write, and I'm not a great writer, but I enjoy getting info out there. So podcasting, my full days were in radio, and it's gonna be a lot more fun, and I think I can have greater impact with really showcasing these amazing people. So what I have to propose to everybody here today is this, what I'm calling, and it's nothing new here, if you can go up to the, yeah, no worries, peer-to-peer knowledge development network. It was too long. And then we have Nick. Nick's in the back of the room here. Hi, Nick. Nick was the last sort of poor soul that I interviewed, but he's got amazing things to say. So it's the peer-to-peer network building is all around how can we showcase our talents in different ways. And the idea is I hang out with too many artists, I guess, and a lot of people who are in bands, and they do what's called crowdfunding. Are you familiar with crowdfunding? And I'm going to be a little bit provocative here because I thought, you know, why can't we do that in the public service? Why can't we maybe at an arm's length set up a crowdfunding site and help fund each one of us in our career development pathways? So it would look something like this. You go on, you talk about who you are, what you're about, and what opportunity you're seeking, and what the benefits of that opportunity would be for the greater good, the Canadian public, for your government, for your agency, and for you personally. And you turn to your peers and ask your peers, do you think this is important learning? Would you support me in this learning opportunity? And if so, would you potentially fund me? And I'll have 50% in the game to showcase my commitment to this. But if you're willing to fund me to get this opportunity, I'm going to really look at ways that I can share the learning that I've gained from this opportunity. So I want to talk about knowledge dissemination models and sharing models. So I'm going to have to pitch not only why I want this opportunity, but what I'm going to do with this opportunity. and how I'd like to turn it into direct action. And so the peer group could potentially say, okay, I'm willing to support that, but I'm also interested in X, Y, Z. And so if you can, through your experience here, gain some knowledge or some connections for me and bring those back, now we're both winning. And what this model does is it really, I think, challenges what traditionally has been the way that you sort of rise, is knowledge keeping and holding on to. So this is a way I think we could totally flip that on its head and showcase a very disruptive collaboration model that demonstrates the principles of the next generation of public servants. What we're about is each other's success. What we're about is identifying our own needs for professional development. Maybe not in the boxes that are presented to us, that you can do this, this, or this course this year. You only got about $300 to $500, and you got to write 5 pages of a rationale to get that opportunity. Let alone if you want to go to a conference, because I think that's the reality we're living in. Because of fiscal constraints, and I get all that. But I think we need to break free of some of that. And I think we need to test some new models. And maybe it doesn't need to be about financial investments, because some of my friends have said, yeah, I don't know, people are broke and they've got all these challenges, and you want them to spend money and invest in your campaign. Crowdfunding works, and it works very well. It's highly effective. But what if we get some sponsors around the table that said, you know what, I'd like to help support some of these professional development opportunities. So if you can, through some sort of magic threshold number, showcase that your peer group really supports you getting this opportunity, because obviously they trust you. Obviously they're happy with how you're going to share that opportunity with many. And if you hit this threshold, we'll pay for you to get that opportunity. Or we'll open up a spot at a conference, or whatever it is that you feel that you're really trying to get. We'll sponsor you and open up the spot and complement your access to this. And so with that, I don't want to take too much time, because I'd like to just do more Q&A and open it up to the floor. But it's models like this that can really help us be in charge of our own career development. You know, accountability rests on our shoulders. We're not going to get, I don't think, a ton of support in the future with the fiscal environment the way that it is. So how can we be in charge of our own pathways? How can we showcase our talents in a way that we want to showcase our talents? And then have public service agency and commission turn around and see, wow, look at all these amazing people doing these incredible things, and they're turning around and sharing their knowledge as far and wide as they possibly can. That's something we can be very proud of, and if that's the future, it's a very exciting future for us.
Very good, thank you. Wow, thank you to all of our panelists. Some real gems to percolate over, and I'm going to stand up so I can see everyone in the room as we open the floor to questions. And has anybody got something they want to jump up right away to ask one or all of our panelists? Yes, we have a microphone heading your way.
Hi, my name is Sable. I work at Public Health Agency of Canada, but I have about 15, for about the last 6 years, but I have 15 years before that in municipal government. So I'm thinking of this from the perspective of public service in general, but my specific points are some of the things I've been observing in the last while in the federal government. What's interesting is we're not just seeing it within the federal government, but we're seeing it within some of our provincial counterparts. That career development is still seen, and almost to your point, as something that's the individual's responsibility. And what's missing is the ability to align your career development with what the organization may or may not want. We're, in my center, we're not HR, but we're responsible for competency-based approach to workforce management. And in some of our early successes, we've seen that for the first time, people can see, I'll use a biologist level, for example, BI2, trying to figure out how to become a BI4, suddenly they have the ability to understand that that is a management function, that their learning and development plan shouldn't just be necessarily about their science interests, but maybe if they want to be a BI4, they have to certainly about development. What's fascinating is that's kind of news to people, like in terms of having something very clear for people to see that pathway. I think classifications is part of the problem. I really do believe that the problem is we bring people in because they're incredibly good scientists, and then we expect them to suddenly magically become a manager without any support or development. And that, as we all know, creates a lot of problems. And that's not just federal, it's also municipal as well. And I don't think we're using some of our other opportunities. I mean, acting, as you know, I think in all public service, people are constantly rotating around doing acting assignments, backfilling. We're not bringing people in, so people are kind of rotating through jobs. But we're still seeing a little bit of bums and chairs, and we're not really putting in place some infrastructure to, for example, take a 4-month acting opportunity. Document why that's a development opportunity. What some of the objectives of that opportunity should be in terms of you're in this job. It's not just to fill a space, you're actually here because of development opportunity and your organization. We don't document that. So the person goes back to their job and the opportunity is lost. So I guess what I'm talking about is, can we talk a bit about some infrastructure that is forcing individuals to navigate their own path to the public service? Without, from my perspective, and I'm saying this to make a point, active support and understanding that when someone develops their skill sets as an individual, it's a benefit to the organization. It's not just for them, it's for the organization. And I think that's really missing from the context in which we're working. I mean that at all levels of public service, but we're really seeing it very much that way.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Thanks for the example. You know, I think the biggest difficulty that we have sometimes is to be able to communicate what's happening. Although there are issues, there are a lot of things that are happening that we don't necessarily connect to. And often that's part of the problem, is that we're not connecting the dots. There are a lot of initiatives that are happening from communities of practice within the federal government, but also to the point that you were making about career progression for scientists. There's an initiative that actually exists within the Public Service of Canada, which is called One HR for Science. It's early, it's starting, there's a lot of discussion, but the whole idea is to know, how do you manage scientific careers within the federal public service? Because you are right, scientists are generally hired because of the skills and the knowledge that they have from the scientific standpoint, but eventually their careers will bring them into the managerial space. So part of it is to actually be able to help them progress their careers, get the right development, and essentially make sure that we're giving them all the opportunities to enter into the EX category ranks of management, if they so wish to. So these are early ideas, they're starting, but there is a community that is basically most of the departments in the federal public service are getting together to try to generate that. Not only is it to drive scientists into managerial careers, but it's also to look at how do we continue to evolve our scientists within the federal public service so that they're not feeling that they're stuck into one department. How do we benefit from the knowledge that they have across scientific departments? So there are opportunities. Some of them are early, but this is due to a whole bunch of people who realized that there was an issue and they got together to try to find the solution. So part of it is to feel empowered to put together some ideas and get together with like-minded people or people who have different views and bring forward your innovative ideas. So do not wait to be asked. Do not wait to be triggered. Sometimes ideas come from the base up, and you can't always expect for people to go say, oh, is there anybody here who would like to volunteer to do something? Go ahead. It's our public service as a whole, and you people should be empowered to actually try ideas, get together, and there's all kinds of communities that are out there that are doing that.
I just want to read a quote that I came across last week. I do this thing where I go to bookstores and I open a book, and if the page speaks to me, I'm like, okay, I gotta get this book. And I kid you not, the quote was from Gandhi: "It is beneath human dignity to lose one's individuality and become a mere cog in the machine." And I think, to your point, we're accepting that, but we can't accept that any longer. We can't fit into that. And there's a way that we can connect and do peer-to-peer coaching, do the informal network building, do all these different practices, but get serious and structured about them, disciplined with them, so that we can start to really chart a new kind of way forward. And we're not waiting on the organization to have finances to support anything, and we're not waiting for the classification shifts to happen. And I do agree, this is not just individual responsibility. It also does meet the collective interest of the organization. But I think our challenge within the next 3 to 5 years is to demonstrate how innovative and how much ingenuity we have in our perseverance to continue to grow and develop and showcase our talent to the bigger agency so that they recognize, okay, we have a problem and we've got a number of people trying to solve it for us. Let's get this figured out because we're now in a great position to do so.
Just both great points, and I'll just do one point before I will turn it back to the floor unless Mike has something to add as well. The one thing, Colleen and I actually were just talking about this exact point today is, if you remember 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was being told that you own your own career. This is your career, you make what you want of it, you gotta go own it. And be the pulse of yourself and you're your biggest supporter. Well, we went on and did that, and the generation's been doing that. But now the next step is taking it to that next level. And Colleen and I were discussing this, is now it's not just you own your career, but now you own your career development. And we need to take it to that next level. It's not just the career, the position, the classification, the title, all these extra things. There's the added piece on it, that there is the career development, and it is on us as a generation, as a whole, as an employee, and as a public servant, to take ownership of that and say, this is what I want to do, and this is how I can get around it. If you don't know how to do that, it's exactly what Colleen's talking about and Christine's talking about, is getting in those opportunities of peer-to-peer mentoring, peer-to-peer counseling, conversations with similar people, conversations with people that challenge your views, and thinking outside the box on a regular basis. That's what I found when I joined the IPAC board of directors. I had a totally different perspective on a few things, but I sit at that table and I listen to people who have way more experience and are way smarter than I'll ever be, I'm sure, challenge me on a regular basis for how I think. And I went out and found that and seek that out. And I don't have to agree with everybody, but it's changing my mentality of how I'm thinking of things. So being on a panel like this and talking to the three of you and hopefully talking to all of you guys, we'll get there. But it is that time where it's not just owning your career anymore. It's now, let's try to own our career development.
Well, that's a great intervention.
And that's it. All right. Very good. Yes, go ahead.
As James has already kindly pointed out, my name's David. It's heartening to see this conversation and these ideas surface at an IPAC conference, and particularly be so well articulated by all four of you. So thank you, and thank you to the organizers for this session. My question is primarily for Christine. Christine, I think a lot of what I've heard from at least you as well as the other panelists, I've heard at other times across the country. And so these aren't new ideas, or ideas are very much surfacing and au courant. One of my concerns is whether or not we have the right institutions to adapt to the 21st century demands of the labor force. And two things are particularly concern me, but this is very much a question. One is, the institution for which you work was an institutional innovation from 1908. So we lived in a very different time then, of course, and then layered on top of that is collective bargaining, which developed over a longer period of time, but primarily came about in 1944. And so I'm wondering if those institutions in particular are institutional impediments to doing the kinds of things that I hear other panelists and other young people advocating for in public service across Canada.
You may be right, David, but as we would know, everything evolves at a different pace. Will the Public Service Commission be the same in 2050? Potentially not. Will it still exist? Maybe not. One of the things that we recognize, though, is that we do have to evolve, and that's why we've actually really been rethinking the role that we play and how we play it. Because in 2005, we put forward a new piece of legislation that offered all kinds of flexibility, and we realized throughout the system that as opposed to applying the flexibilities, what was happening is everybody was force-fitting what they knew into the new legislation. So part of it is that, yes, it takes time for things to change, and nothing is all brand new, but it's by talking and slowly changing. Institutions are extremely hard to change. There's a lot of history, but sometimes you learn as well from that history. If I go back to 1908 as to why the commission was created, it was fundamentally to remove partisanship out of public service. Is that still warranted today? Probably so. There is still a need for Canadians to know that their public servants are not biased from a political standpoint. So there is still some basis for which we're operating and why we're there to ensure that integrity of the staffing system. Now, is it evolving? Yes, it is evolving, because we've had the Supreme Court who's brought forward some information to the effect of the rights and obligations of public servants, and we're doing our darndest best to actually respect that. We're being challenged in front of the courts, which is really nice because some of the institutions are there to actually help us in the role that we're playing. So we're looking forward to whatever information we can bring. But the idea is the manner in which we conduct our business, can that be done differently? Is it the day-to-day that can change? Yes, it can. And are we basically respectful of what is expected of us, what is expected from Canadians, and are we still serving? The day that we come to a point where we say, maybe the delegated authorities that we have to go to the department is totally delegated 100%, maybe the commission may not be there. It's funny because I met with the delegation from India at a certain point, and they were kind of surprised with how decentralized we were as a commission. And they kind of basically said, aren't you worried that one day you're not going to exist anymore? Well, if that day comes, it's because something else has replaced it and there's something better to be had. But for now, we still see the viability of our role, but we're trying to modernize and we're trying to do as best as we can to bring in the right flexibilities. But sometimes it requires one person to stop and to think about the way that we are conducting our business, which is what we've collectively done at the commission at this point, and working with our system to actually bring in new ideas, more flexibility, so that the system actually react better for recruitment, for retention, especially in light of the fact that we are expecting 8,000 public servants to retire in the next 3 years. So do we know where we want to go with it? Maybe not so much, but we're pushing to get people to think about it.
Do any of our other panelists like to? No? Jordan, do we have any online questions?
Right now, no.
Come on, people
Come on
out there.
online.
We're counting on you. All right, but in the meantime, I see a hand up here and a hand here. So I don't know who is first. So Julia, I'm gonna go to you first. Maddie's coming. Yeah.
Maddie, thank you to all of you. This is very enjoyable, which I expected since I at least met 4 of the 5 panels before I started. So my name is Julia Sable. I work in the Public Service Commission of Nova Scotia with Langley here, and current co-chair of Governance, so also worked with Mike a lot. I guess I have one comment sort of just echoing and supporting what I've heard, and one question. So I think in terms of professional development, it's really interesting sort of where you're going with this in terms of ways that we can engage in professional development that aren't necessarily costly. I'm thinking of the conversation this morning, if you heard the session on what keeps deputies up at night, where we're talking about fiscal constraint and at the same time the importance of human resources and developing the human resources that are there. So the peer-to-peer coaching, I think, is a fascinating thing, and I know this idea of project-based work, or we've been talking about trying to create a skills inventory where you could just go in and search. If you need someone for a month, they could come work with you on this project and be relieved of their assignment in their other department, and we haven't gotten down to the details. But I was talking to someone recently, and she wanted to do this management development program because she felt that was the only way she could develop in the public service. And her department said, well, that's great, but we can't pay for you. So she was going to, I think she is going to pay $3,000 out of pocket, her own pocket, to do this program, which was really alarming to me, that she felt that she needed to spend her own money to do something that was going to benefit her department, and that was the only way that she could do it. I know, right? It was a little bit alarming.
I'm trying hard to keep my body language in check.
Okay. So the more we can do to sort of support that mentality that there are other ways to develop professionally and to support that peer-to-peer learning or the reverse mentoring, I guess I'm just saying I really hope that we can continue doing that, and I think we're trying to do that now through governance. The other question is more on the recruitment side. I think I was recently talking to some people in the federal public service here, all women, as it turned out. 4 of them, all of them had the same story. I worked for 5 years in 4-month casual positions before I finally got a position as in administration, which wasn't necessarily what they wanted, as administrative assistants. Or one of them was still working after 4.5 years trying to find an indeterminate position, I guess is the way you call it in federal public service. So how, and I know that this is sort of related to fiscal reality, but I feel like these fiscal constraints create these distortions in the hiring process as well, where we go and we rely on casuals, or in the provincial public service, we seem to rely a lot on temps. And then they're there for years without any benefits or protections and losing half their pay, and it also is mostly women from what I've seen. So I guess I'm just wondering about this piece of it, because you know, well, early you're the moderator, so you don't, not necessarily aiming this at you. But I'm just curious how we balance this with the fiscal constraints that are sort of causing these, well, I guess I will call them distortions in the HR processes that rely on these short-term positions that give people very little security, and often even the young people trying to enter. Is that, I know I rambled a bit there. Is that a clear question?
All good. Who would like to go first?
There's actually, and you know, on this one, I will refer to the Deloitte paper because I think they actually outlined a lot of that. We federally think that we rode the wave on fiscal constraint and the cuts that we went through the federal public service in a very responsible manner. I'm sure that people that were affected would not necessarily agree, because you can never actually get everybody happy in any circumstance. We were able, through different mechanisms, to maintain a lot of the people who had been affected and reposition them within the public service, because we recognized that they had experience, skill set, and that they could, you know, and basically had been trained by the federal government, so we maintained them and repositioning them in different positions. Of course, the uncertainty brought a lot of managers to think about going for casuals. Part of it is, I would say, not always perfect HR planning. It is probably, you know, a lot of managers have not gone through such cuts, and therefore were not able to foresee what it meant as an impact. So part of it is to start learning about circumstances and better planning and better looking ahead and doing better foresight. We do a lot of foresight on policy, and often we forget the most important part, which is people assets. And so we don't necessarily do a lot of foresight when it comes to people management. And that's probably where we need to do. We need to develop different leadership approaches when it comes to HR. We need to actually do, like I was saying at the beginning, a culture shift of how we think about our workforce. And we need to be thinking about how do we reinvent the HR systems so that we can, in fact, foresee some of the things that may happen at the forefront. But that being said, after a number of casuals, which is not necessarily the most secure place to be as a casual, they did get into the public service eventually, because it does give you a number of experience. But there are better ways of doing this, we recognize. We have different mechanisms for staffing, but we need to rethink them, and we are learning, and there's a big exercise that is happening right now in the lessons learned, and how do we deal with situations like we went through cuts. It was not the perfect world, but considering the storm that we were in, we kind of like rode that tsunami in a pretty good manner when it came to people management. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't. Can we improve? Yes, we can. Can we be more creative? Hopefully we can. But we have gone away, like terms, for example. This is something that the federal government has said. We put our foot down at a certain point, saying people going from term to term to term, after a number of years, they become indeterminate. So there are things that are being addressed, but it's not all perfect, and there's still more to be done for sure.
This is not necessarily to your point, but it's building off of something you said about reimagining, and I go on and on about reimagining, redefining, and redesigning the public service of the 21st century. And I'm not always popular when I bring this perspective to the table with some of our leaders in BC Gov. But if the public service agency wanted to really address culture change, I think in 48 hours, by looking at where are their challenges within the public service culture, i.e. bullying, i.e. not being able to work well with people, call it out and say, this is the end of that. You're no longer going to be working in this public service of excellence if those behaviors continue, because I think that's an elephant in the room when we have these conversations. And I have a lot of empathy. Some people have not been able to actually be trained to manage people well. That's okay. You might be excellent at policy thinking. You might be an expert in all these other areas, or a phenomenal researcher or scientist or whatever. But you know what? If you can't manage people today, in the 21st century public service, we need to address that, and we need to put the best people who can really untap all that potential, the latent human capital that's being wasted in the public service on a daily basis, and figure it out. And it needs to be a thoughtful, collective conversation, but I think that's something that could be addressed, and very quickly that would send a clear message across government. We're in business and we are looking at culture change, and these characteristics and behaviors will no longer be tolerated.
I would fully agree with that statement, but I would want to have somebody who would tell me how to do it.
Yeah.
Because it is not a simple task. We have policies, even doing what we have in our system right now is extremely difficult. So if anybody has really strong ideas on how it could simply be done, like in the context of a 48-hour context, I'd be the first. I'm a taker.
Cool. Let's go for drinks.
Drinks will solve it. Just quickly on that,
I'll pay.
there we go, cash for ideas. I do like that in terms of, again, like leveraging the private sector piece and the sharing economy, like there needs to be a compensation model that underwrites that, benefited from working with any number of temporary or kind of intern employees that had phenomenal ideas that there's no kind of, whereas in the private sector, you'd be rewarded for kind of generating a good idea that addresses a major problem. You've got to get to a compensation system that allows for that. Big fan of like the Elon Musk kind of X idea, or the Ideas Prize, the X Prize piece, where so simply a challenge is issued. You can do this in the context of the public service, modest pot of money, but more importantly, kind of a will associated with like exercising that idea, and is the prize that you would come away from, and kind of provide a indiscriminate voice for a channel for folks that sit in potentially part-time or lower rungs of the organization to voice their ideas and then ultimately be compensated from it. This pyramid is not going to work over the long term. Chartered accountant hat on, like it scares me to death as someone who's got what I claim on pension, kind of in terms of 20 years from now, what that will look like. I just don't think it's sustainable. We need new compensation models that actually are pointing towards solving the problems versus kind of holding that archaic model up.
And if I can, I see Nick wants to talk, so I don't mind cutting him off for a second. Sorry, buddy. Just one thing to play off with your comment, Christine, and I don't mean to disagree with you, because obviously I think our perspectives are probably a lot different. But when we went through the most recent workforce adjustment, working with the federal government, I was working at Alberta Federal Council at the time, and saw that from a different perspective, I think from the regional level. And you know, one comment I may have misunderstood, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the understanding that people were given these impact letters, and then many of them were then, we were able to find spots for them, whether it was in different positions or other departments or however. I would challenge that and say I don't really count that as a success story at all in that process, because I think one of the main reasons that happened, especially when I saw it from the regional level working in Alberta, is the people that stayed and rode that out really were able to continually keep their positions or find new positions within the department because of the influx of people that left. We had a huge influx of people, at least in Alberta. I'm only speaking from my experience, so if I'm incorrect from all your perspectives, please share that with me, because I'd love to hear more success on that. But what we found in Alberta is a great majority of those people left the federal public service and went to the government of Alberta and started working there. And when you look at the stats of what the public service looks like between those two orders of government, you can tell where we went through workforce adjustment, because we had a huge dip and they had a huge spike. And that wasn't because those people that went over there they were done, they were job hunting. It was because they potentially got the threat of that. And the people that rode it out and stayed got the positions. But I don't think I wouldn't necessarily say that's an HR success or a successful way that we realigned how we did the business. It was just the two things happened. People got those, they had that little fear, and they left. And I think it supports very much what we saw and what I said earlier with the new professional survey is we do the terms, we do the things, and going back to Julia, your question on this, people aren't going to wait around for 4 years anymore to write out terms and contracts. That's great, and we've seen that process has worked for so many years. But our generation, at least judging on the results that I see of 2,500 people so far across the country, are saying we're not going to do that anymore, and nor should we have to. And so we really have to start realigning how we're thinking that, and it is, to your point that you said, is finding out these new practices of doing things on the HR side of things and how we're going to do that to get the retention across the public service.
Thank you. Nick, I'm going to ask you to wait for 1 second because we have a gentleman here with his hand up. And then we'll go to you. Okay.
Martin from Policy Horizons in Ottawa. So we're in a time where we're trying to tackle complex problems. We know that, or in my opinion, one of the great ways of doing that is getting really multidisciplinary teams, getting a lot of different people, different points of views, tackling the same problem, and that's creating new career paths that are less specialized or that have kind of a wacky adventure through government. And sometimes the boxes, the EC boxes, or the whatever titles you have, they're very rigid. How is government set up for adapting itself for these new careers, these new knowledge workers that are going to pick up big data or whatever it is? Are boxes really apt for that? Are they constrained? Do we have any way of changing the way we articulate what is a good worker for a good position? And is that too rigid?
All right, so wicked problems and really require systems response and workers that can work in that milieu, and are we really prepared or wired for that just now, I guess? Is that it in a nutshell?
We're seeing more and more, at least in the federal public service, going to generic job descriptions, which are meant to be kind of giving you a sense of the area in which you work as opposed to the specifics of your job. So a lot of that is going to allow to be able to give yourself like some elbow room to be able to do what is specific to some of the new knowledge working. So hopefully that will be part of the solution. I'm not sure that it's the only solution, but it is definitely a way of thinking a little bit differently, so that allows you to do your work in a much more comprehensive perspective from the new stuff that you may want to do. The other aspect is through your talent management perspective, where you basically can outline some of the work objectives that are not necessarily outlined in your job description per se. Now, that being said, is it the most innovative way of doing it? Probably not, but it is definitely a step in a different direction. And I think it's important that we start thinking about the work that people do, not as a box. The more that we continue to outline the box, the more that we are limiting innovation. Now, understand that not every public servant wants to work outside its box either. So we're talking a lot about different things, innovation, but not everybody is unhappy with the way that the system works either. So it's a question of understanding like where we want to go and in which context. When some people are extremely happy to be able to say, I'm not going to do this because it's not in my work description. So it's always difficult when you're thinking about change to look at where are the areas and who is on what side of what fence, right?
I think anyone that ever says it's not my job or that's not my department should be instantly fired. To that point, like I brought up the idea earlier of kind of
Colleen may have a solution.
The idea of like kind of born from kind of that entrepreneur in residence piece, where there's or even looking at kind of how a lot of Ivy League schools in the U.S. Would reward their graduates right now, where a group of VCs, like venture capitalists, would back a team of 2 or 3 grads based on their potential. There's a set pot of 150Ks that they have a year to figure out how to turn into something else, and not much guidance kind of other than that. I think it'd be a tough sell in terms of some of the existing institutions and collective bargaining process to do things like that. But if we don't create the space, and it's very much about creating a space for kind of innovative ideas to flow through, like a non-box environment will never get there. So just that open mandate with the base level of kind of resources to allow it to be an attractive opportunity. We have to have more positions that aren't positions carved out for innovators.
Just quickly, so I get to the next question. When we're thinking about redesigning a public service or reimagining it, it'd be great if we could get to a place where, you know what, we should have half the service working on the future and complexity, in trying to do rapid prototyping, testing, learning, just continually kind of pushing forward to get us better prepared for what's coming. And there's a lot coming at us, and we're going to be the ones dealing with this. And that's why there's this real push for, can we please be mentored up? Can we please get professional development and career opportunities? Because we're going to need it, and you're going to want us to have that skill set and that expertise. So there's people who, I get it, they're happy, they're content where they're at. They may not want to be innovators. That's cool. But I think we should really focus on, okay, how do we move half our organization into the 21st century future outlooking kind of organization? And how do we look at sort of maintaining the day-to-day, all the good stuff that we have to do as a responsible government? And one of the questions I'm starting to ask people that I interview now is, do you want to be the last leader of the 20th century version of your agency, or do you want to be the first leader of the 21st version of your agency? And guess what the answer almost always is? 21st. Then how? And don't tell me about what we need to do. Show me or tell me, demonstrate what you're doing now to create those opportunities. So I think we can really collectively have a conversation, maybe in IPAC or through IPAC, a redesign. What can we look like? And then how do we get there? Because we've got enough expertise to kind of lay out a bit of a blueprint for us.
No, I don't want to cut that.
Again.
So, I'd like to start by saying excellent. I would like to touch on the culture aspect of it. So we were touching briefly on culture and what it means with the actual change, but retention, we didn't really specifically get into how it actually relates to culture change. Fundamentally, it's 8 years, I'm going 8 years on public service now on the federal level. And what I've noticed in my career now working in human resources is that fundamentally managers, so it doesn't matter what level they are, entry-level managers all the way up, don't really know who they have on their teams, what abilities they're actually, or what skill sets these individual, like each person can actually contribute. That's a culture piece. That's a significant piece. If you ask any leader in an NGO or in a private sector that's leading major transformation initiatives, they need to know who they have and what they're able to bring on the plate, like what they're able to lead with. It's significant, I think, in the current context for us to have this conversation in the public sector, because we need to be realistic with ourselves and really understand in our current constraint situation, in our current reality, how do we do this? This is significant when I believe that the numbers are a lot higher when we look individually in certain areas of specialization at the retirement level. But we're also now looking at the evolution and transition of the jobs. Are they actually meaningful, and do we actually need them as it continues to evolve? And the culture shift needs to be really addressed in the sense where by 2025, we're looking at 75% of millennials in the workplace. They don't care if they're permanent or not permanent. That's not what matters to them. That's not how they're driven. So how are we preparing? I would love to hear from the panel, how are we preparing in order to retain, motivate, engage this reality of this culture change?
Very good question, and that will be our last question because we only have a few minutes left. So thank you, Nick. It's kind of a good one to end on. Mike, you want to go first?
Just quickly, I think you have to embrace that big time. And I think you have to have better mechanisms for kind of knowledge capture and then translation and transition built into the piece that, particularly from a technology perspective, ensures that there's some continuity there in an environment where we will be certainly in the private sector, and then government usually follows private sector 50 years later, kind of pieces to enable that freelance economy. So leveraging kind of blogging, kind of social media, like all the technological tools that are there in place to ensure some continuity are going to be important. And then I think it's very important also to factor in the mental health toll and the resources that's going to take on our system for this environment that is going to create rapid churn. There's complexity that comes out of that shorter term nature of employment.
Just quickly, informal networks, I think that's the way in which we will address a number of these problems. And it's just, let's just start doing it. Let's get a vehicle. There's lots of different ones out there. We can connect them better. And then let's start showcasing our expertise. And over time, I think you'll start to get a sense that, you know, people are applying themselves to different responsibilities. They're showcasing their talents in different ways, and they're able to find that their passion's being met and they have the sense of meaning in their work, because that's so critical. And the number one challenge facing organizations around the world, according to the Deloitte report, is engagement. Like, on our watch, I feel ashamed. Engagement we can actually address. You can't force somebody to engage, but you can set up the conversations, you can set up the informal opportunities to actually allow people to share how they want to engage, and then give them those opportunities. We need sponsorship, and we need audacious, courageous leadership to say, we're holding a space and we're gonna try a bunch of different things here, and we're gonna learn. And there's nothing stopping us from doing that as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing within any public service agency that I think would stop that at all. So let's figure it out.
Nick, let me throw the question back at you. When's the last time that you organized with a bunch of your colleagues to entertain your new manager and say, hey, we want to meet with you and tell you who we are? Don't always put your faith or your future in the hands of your manager. Take hold and do it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's exactly what I was going to say too. When I started working with City of Calgary, that was my first question. We started the interview process. I asked, how many times are we going to meet on a regular basis? Because we work in different offices. And I said, I want to know how often we're going to work so we can keep on track of one another. I wanted to know their learning styles and their management techniques, and I wanted to share with them my side of that as well. So I think, just to wrap up a little bit, I think Nick answered it. It's a new world. We have new work, and we need to find new engagement strategies. And one thing to do that is to not only, we've also always heard about looking at those lessons learned and those best practices. I find that's a little bit forward, backwards thinking. I would rather challenge all of you guys to start looking at those next practices.
Wow, some excellent wisdom coming out of the four of you. And oh, look, can we work horizontally without devolving the established institutions to enable collaboration and exchanges of employees? Rhetorical. Yeah, well, yeah, it is. But you know, I wrote something here, and it said, can our tri-sector athletes, to capitalize on Mike's term, can they be shared resources across all three levels of government? Think about the cost reductions for all of us if we can start sharing people across, and of course, new things will come up. So we're not looking to shed a bunch of people, but wouldn't it be nice if we could share those tents and those resources across pathways and provide meaningful work for all involved? Well, I wanted, on behalf of IPAC and everybody here, I want to thank our panelists for their points of view and their perspectives, which I think has left a lot for you to talk about over the next couple of days. I'll be shameless and say that I'm disappointed that our young professionals afternoon on Wednesday, I'm told the registration for that is low and it's not cost prohibitive. So get out there and trump that one. It's an opportunity to continue this conversation around resilience in our younger workforce. And boy, I would ever love to have a coffee with the four of you. Maybe afterwards we can. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to our wonderful audience today for a wonderful interactive discussion on recruitment and retention in the modern public service. Thank you so much. Just got really juicy right at the end. I know. You announced that everybody is going one of the four walking tours to log down. Yeah. Okay. I think I turned up. Oh no, here I am. Anyone going on one of the four walking tours, you must go to the lobby now. So make your way to the lobby. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, of course. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Excellent. Nice to meet you.
I just said it was this. Hi, guys.
Oh, is it? Very nice session.
Hi, thank you. Nice to see you. I saw you down there earlier, and I was wondering, are you here for the whole conference? Yeah.
I'm a hiring manager. This is very relevant.
You know what? You took time.